Hello everyone, and welcome to my video series on the Spring MVC Framework. Today's video will be on how to get started with your very first application. The first thing you're going to want to do is download the Spring Tools Suite development environment. Spring Tools is essentially an IDE built on Eclipse that's been retrofitted with a bunch of tools that make Spring development a lot easier. To download Spring Tools, simply head over to spring.io-tools, scroll down to the Download STS button and click to download. Now, if you, like me, need to download the 64-bit version, you're going to want to click on the See All Versions link. If you want to download STS for an operating system other than the one that you're currently using, you also want to click on this link. Next, we want to expand the version that we want to download and click on the zip link. Now, I'm actually not going to be doing this as I have already downloaded it and pasted it on my desktop. Next, we want to extract the file. I'm going to be using 7-zip, but you can also use the default Windows extractor. Let's extract it to the desktop and wait for it to finish. Alright, great. Now that that's done, let's open it up and see what we've got. We are immediately greeted by three directories. The legal directory, which is licensing information and such. A pivotal TC server, which is essentially a Tomcat server that's been configured in such a way that Pivotal products deploy a lot easier. Pivotal products meaning Spring, for example. Lastly, we have the Spring Tools release directory. This is essentially the directory that the IDE is in. So without any further ado, let's double click the sts.exe icon and launch up our IDE. So we're greeted by the Spring Tools Suite splash screen. The first time that you open up the IDE, it's going to take quite a while to load. However, subsequent loads will be a lot faster. So the first thing that it asks us is to specify a workspace directory. Now, a workspace directory is essentially a directory in which all of your projects are going to be stored. Let's make a new folder on the desktop and let's name it Workspace, and let's choose the option to set it as a default so we don't get asked this question again the next time that we open up the IDE. As you can see, Eclipse is now loading a bunch of its core modules. Alright, and our IDE has started. So as you can see, we're greeted by a dashboard that gives us more information about Spring. And if you look in the bottom left, our Pivotal Tomcat server has already been registered in the IDE. We will use this Pivotal server to run our application essentially. Now before we start, let's do a few configurations so that the IDE runs a bit faster and it's overall a lot less clunky if you do this. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to disable some of the validation that we're not going to be using. To do this, simply click on Window, Preferences, search for Validation, select the validation under Spring, and uncheck Webflow Validator as we're not going to be using Webflow. Next, since we are going to be developing a web application, we need to specify the browser that we would like to use. We can do this by clicking on Window, Web Browser, and then selecting the one that you would like. I personally am going to be using Chrome. Now, since we are not really going to be making use of the Outline and Spring Explorer panels, let's go ahead and close those. Alright, and let's close the dashboard. Now we are ready to get started. So let's create our first Hello World application. We do this by clicking on New, by clicking on File, New Spring Project. We are then greeted by the New Spring Project dialog. So let's name our application Hello World and create it from a template. So these templates are essentially skeleton projects that we can use to bootstrap our application. We are going to be using the Spring MVC project template as we are essentially only making use of Spring MVC. we will then be asked to specify the top level package. Let's call our top level package com.tutorial.hello-world. Now, as soon as our project has completed building, let's take a look at what we've got. So you can immediately notice that we are using a Maven project. Now, what is Maven? Maven is a build tool that our project will be using. It will compile our source code into a library. Maven also serves as a dependency management tool, and if you open your pom.xml file, you will see all of the dependencies that an empty Spring project needs. If we were to add additional dependencies, such as, for instance, Hibernate, if we choose to use that as our object relational mapper, we would simply click on the Add button and do that here. Now, you will also notice that we are using the default Maven project structure. This means that all of our web files are located in the source, main, web app directory, and all of our web configuration files are located in the web inf directory. So let's start up our application and see what happens. Now, to do this, we need to right click on our project, select debug as, click on debug on server, and select our pivotal Tomcat server. Alright, our application will build. It will launch a window in the browser, and it will send a request to our server. Our server will then respond with this beautiful Hello World page, which also contains the date of the server. So how does our application serve this page? When our application starts up, it loads configurations out of the web inf, Spring, app servlet, servlet context.xml file. We don't need to worry about exactly what happens when this is done right now. What we do want to look at is the context component scan tag. This tag essentially specifies that our base package is the com.tutorial.hello-world package. This ensures that when a request comes in, a scan is made of the components in the base package, looking for a component that can handle the request, specifically a class annotated as a controller. In the source main Java directory, we have a class named home controller in the com.tutorial hello world package. Now, this home controller of ours is annotated as a controller and is therefore a possible candidate to handle the request. Now, what exactly is the request that's being made from our browser? If we open up our browser and open up our development tools, I'm going to click on Leave Network. If we then refresh the page and we take a look at the tooltip on the request, it will show us that the request is made to HTTP localhost port 8080-hello world-. Now, how routing works in Spring is quite a bit different to how routing works in other popular web application frameworks. The top level route, the first step in the routing, is essentially automatically resolved as the application name. The application name is defined in our pom.xml file by the artifact ID, which is in this case hello world. Since the first step is automatically resolved without the application knowing of it, it only needs to resolve steps from there. Now, our browser is requesting the default route beyond the application name step. This means that when the request is digested, the application looks for the route corresponding to the value of /. In our home controller, we annotate that it can in fact handle a GET request with the value of /. We do this by annotating the function as a request mapping, which essentially means that a request can map to this function. What this function essentially does is it writes a log message, it creates a new date object, it formats the date object, and it adds it as an attribute to the model. It then returns a string value of home. What essentially happens when the string value is returned is the Spring MVC view resolver goes ahead and resolves a view that has a matching name to whatever string value you returned. In this case, it's going to resolve to the home.jsp file. A JSP file is a Java server pages file. It looks like an HTML file, but it's in fact a Java file, which contains Java code and also contains HTML tags. This will be used to render our model to return it to the browser. Now, Spring MVC makes very heavy use of these JSP files for their templating capabilities. What this means is that we can essentially render any attribute that we bound to the model. We can render in the view simply by making use of the templating syntax. This syntax is essentially a $, followed by curly braces and the name of whatever you would want to resolve. So the name is resolved and the object is passed back to the view, which is then used to render the HTML file, which will be passed back to the browser. If we were to replace this with 123, that is what the browser would say the server time is. And if we then changed it back to the server time template, it would then load the correct server time. So that is essentially how templating in Spring MVC and the basic request lifecycle works. And that is it for our How to Get Started video. Thank you very much for watching.